Have you ever felt like you're only safe when you're flawless? Like the second you let something slip, even something small, the whole world might stop loving you? You try so hard to be good, to be kind, to be smart, to never make a mistake, to always be enough. But underneath that polished surface, underneath the control, the neatness, the smile, is a very quiet kind of exhaustion. The kind of tired that no one can see because your suffering doesn't come with screaming or breaking things. It comes with overthinking, with apologizing for things that weren't your fault, with sitting in the dark after everyone's gone to sleep, replaying everything you said that day, wondering if you were too much or not enough. There's a silence to perfectionism that people misunderstand. They think it's about being high-achieving, responsible, a little type A, but really, it's about fear, not just the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, of shame, of being seen without your mask. It's the quiet terror that if you ever let go, even just for a second, everything will fall apart. No one told you directly that you had to be perfect, but somehow, the message soaked into your bones. Maybe it was the way your parents only praised you when you got the answer right. Maybe it was how your teachers lit up when you were composed, helpful, self-controlled. Maybe it was how your friends leaned on you, but never really noticed when you needed someone to lean on. Somewhere along the way, your nervous system learned this equation: love equals performance. And so you began to perform. Perfect student, perfect daughter, perfect friend, perfect partner, perfect worker. You became a master at keeping everything together, even when everything inside you was unraveling. But here's the thing no one sees. Perfection doesn't feel powerful. It feels like being trapped in a glass box. You can see life happening outside, but you're too afraid to break the glass. You're scared of being messy, scared of disappointing people, scared of letting someone down, and maybe, most of all, scared of discovering who you even are if you stop trying so hard to be who they want. Because when you've built your identity on being the one who never messes up, the one who always knows what to say, what to do, when to smile, you start to lose the parts of you that are human. And that's the deepest tragedy of perfectionism. It doesn't just rob you of rest. It robs you of realness. The kind of realness where you can cry in front of someone and not apologize. Where you can admit you don't know what you're doing and not spiral into shame. Where you can be loved not because you earned it, but because you exist. Some people think perfectionists are arrogant, but I know that's not true. Most perfectionists aren't proud of their perfectionism. They're tired of it. They want to let go. They want to breathe. They want to stop editing themselves in real time like there's always an invisible audience. But the inner child won't let them. Because somewhere deep inside, a very young version of you still believes, if I'm not perfect, I won't be safe. And that belief, that deep, unspoken fear, isn't irrational. It's protective. Perfectionism is an ego defense. Not ego in the arrogant sense, but ego in the Jungian sense. The self we build to survive a world that felt unpredictable, conditional, unkind. When the world felt unstable, you became the stabilizer. When people were unpredictable, you became predictable. When love felt like it had to be earned, you overachieved, overfunctioned, overgave. You didn't choose perfectionism because you liked it. You chose it because it kept you from falling apart. Because at some point, falling apart wasn't an option. But now you're here, still holding it all together. Still smiling when it hurts. Still nodding when you want to scream. Still saying, I'm fine, when you're anything but. Can I ask you something? When was the last time you felt seen, not for how perfect you were, but for how human you are? When was the last time someone looked at your mess and said, even this is okay? Perfectionism doesn't crave applause. It craves permission. To rest. To feel. To not be okay. But permission is hard to find in a world that glorifies performance and punishes vulnerability. So we end up turning on ourselves. We become our own harshest critic. We try to beat the shame to the punch. If I point out the flaw first, they can't hurt me with it. If I never show weakness, I'll never be abandoned. But that voice in your head, the one always correcting, always tightening the screws, isn't cruel because you're broken. It's cruel because it's scared. It's trying to protect you the only way it knows how, through control. But control is not the same thing as safety. And perfection is not the same thing as love. Love is what happens after the mask falls. After the breakdown. After the failure. When someone stays. When someone says, I see you. Even here. Even like this. And I want you to know. That someone can be you. Not the version of you who has it all figured out. But the quiet witness inside you. The part who doesn't rush in with judgment. The part who just sits, and sees, and softens. That's the real you. Not the perfectionist. Not the performer. Not the persona. But the soul underneath. The one who was always worthy. Even when you didn't earn it. The one who was always lovable. Even when you made mistakes. The one who didn't have to do anything to be enough, because you already were. And maybe you've never heard that. Maybe no one ever told you. So let me tell you now. You are not hard to love. You are not broken because you need rest. You are not a failure because you're tired. You are a human being with a tender nervous system, doing the best you can in a world that told you your value was conditional. But it isn't. It never was. You don't have to keep earning your place here. You don't have to keep tightening your grip. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You're allowed to be a work in progress. You're allowed to not have it all together. You're allowed to fall apart and still be enough. No more glass boxes. No more masks. No more measuring yourself against impossible standards. It's okay to be messy. It's okay to be unsure. It's okay to not be okay. Perfection was never the goal. It was just a shield. But now you can start learning how to live without it. And maybe that starts with something small. Letting yourself cry. Letting yourself rest. Letting someone in. Or maybe it just starts with letting this moment sink in. You are still here. You are still breathing. And you are still worthy. Not because you performed well. Not because you held it all together. But because you're you. And that is enough. If this resonated, you're not alone. Let me know what part felt real to you. You see, perfection was never about excellence. It was about protection. It was about shielding the most tender, raw, unmet parts of yourself from a world that didn't always know how to hold them gently. It was about keeping your shame in check before anyone else could weaponize it. It was about being the good one, the reliable one, so you wouldn't be abandoned like you were once, quietly, subtly, or all at once. And that wound, that ache for safety, it's not something you made up. It's something you inherited, not just from your own childhood, but from generations before you, who also learned to survive by suppressing their softness. Your ancestors wore perfection like armor too. They too were taught to swallow grief, to smile through pain, to never show weakness. And so now, here you are, carrying that invisible armor through life that keeps asking you to be real. But realness is terrifying when your worth was tied to flawlessness. It's like stepping into daylight after years of living underground. Your eyes squint, your skin recoils. Part of you wants to go back into the shadows, but part of you knows. This is what living feels like. Unfiltered, unedited, alive. The truth is, trying to be perfect all the time has nothing to do with ego. It has everything to do with fear of disconnection. Because we're wired, biologically, for connection. And when we learn that connection is dependent on our performance, we internalize a terrible belief. I am only loved when I get it right. So you grew up micromanaging every smile, every answer, every expression. You scanned people's faces for signs of disappointment. You beat yourself up before anyone else could. And in doing so, you began to split. The outside you, polished, capable, resilient. The inside you, exhausted, anxious, brittle. This split is what Carl Jung called the persona and the shadow. The persona is the face we wear for the world. The shadow is everything we hide to protect that face. And perfectionism? It's the persona on steroids. It's the desperate attempt to manage how others perceive us, while burying our deepest, most vulnerable truths. But here's the thing about shadows. They don't disappear when we ignore them. They grow stronger. They leak out in panic attacks, in insomnia, in numbing behaviors. They whisper to us at 3 a.m. when we're too tired to hold the mask anymore. They remind us, gently or violently, that no matter how perfect we try to be, the wound is still there. And maybe, just maybe, that wound doesn't need to be fixed. Maybe it needs to be held. Like a frightened child who just wants to be picked up and told, "You're not in trouble. You're not too much. I'm still here." Because the wound of perfectionism isn't logical. It's emotional. It's the ache of not being met where you were most tender. It's the pain of becoming who others needed you to be, at the cost of who you actually were. And that pain, it doesn't go away by striving harder. It heals through slowness, through softness, through truth. And the truth is, you were always doing your best. Even when you overworked, even when you obsessed over the details, even when you apologized too much, cared too much, planned too much. That wasn't you being difficult. That was you surviving. That was you trying to feel in control of something, anything, when life felt uncertain. That was you trying to protect the fragile, forgotten parts of yourself from being seen before they were safe. But now, you're older, wiser, more conscious, and you get to choose differently. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gently, little by little. You get to stop aiming for ideal and start practicing honest. You get to replace what will they think with what do I need right now. You get to step out of the constant performance and into presence, because that's what you've been missing, isn't it? Presence. That soft, slow space where you can finally feel what you've been avoiding, where you can finally rest your nervous system, where you can finally be with yourself, not as a project, not as a task, but as a person. A person who has held too much for too long. A person who has bent over backward to be loved. A person who deserves softness just as much as strength. And I know, even now, there's a voice in your head whispering, but what if I let go and everything falls apart? But maybe the question isn't, what if everything falls apart? Maybe the question is, what if things only look like they're falling apart, when in truth, they're finally falling into place? If this feels tender, raw, like a truth you've been circling around your whole life, you're not alone. Let it sink in. And when you're ready, I'll continue. You don't have to let go all at once. You don't have to rip off the mask and bare yourself to the world. That's not healing. That's self-betrayal in another costume. Healing doesn't scream. It whispers. It moves like water through stone, slow, persistent, patient. It's in the tiny moments. When you pause before saying yes to something you don't want to do. When you leave the dishes in the sink and choose to rest instead. When you let yourself feel disappointment without blaming yourself for feeling it. That's where real courage lives. Not in being flawless, but in being real. In choosing softness over self-criticism. In allowing the chaos inside you to exist without judgment. In unlearning the reflex to prove, perform, perfect. Because what if the goal was never to be perfect? What if the goal was to return? To return to the parts of yourself you abandoned. In the name of being acceptable. To gather up the messy, weeping, beautiful, chaotic fragments. And say, you belong. Because they do. All of you belongs. The tired you. The unsure you. The you who has cried in the shower and laughed too loudly and said the wrong thing and forgot to reply. The you who tried too hard. And the you who gave up. None of these versions are disqualifying. They're all data. They're all real. They're all you. And I know that's hard to believe when you've lived under the microscope of your own self-surveillance. But perfectionism isn't truth. It's trauma in disguise. It's a survival response dressed up like a personality trait. It's what Gabor Mate calls the cost of belonging. When we trade authenticity for attachment. Because as children, attachment is survival. And so we become whoever we need to be. Quiet, capable, selfless, good. Until one day, we can't find the original blueprint of who we were. Before we were edited by expectation. But here's the quiet miracle. You can still come home to yourself. Even after years of pretending. Even after decades of tight smiles and controlled tones. Even if you no longer know where to start. Start here. In this breath. In this awareness. In this exact moment where something inside you is whispering. I want to live differently. Not bigger. Not better. Just truer. A truer life isn't always prettier. It's not about glowing routines or curated stillness. It's raw. It's vulnerable. It's waking up and realizing you've been at war with yourself, and laying down your weapons. It's choosing to soothe instead of shame. To observe instead of attack. To soften instead of strive. Because maybe the voice you've been mistaking for discipline has really been your inner critic masquerading as motivation. And maybe the exhaustion you've been calling laziness Is your nervous system begging for peace? You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not weak for needing gentleness. You are simply at a threshold. The place where the perfectionist begins to dissolve, and the real you begins to emerge. It's a slow process, not a before and after transformation, but a lifelong dance between striving and surrender. Some days, you'll still grip the mask. That's okay. Some days, you'll still flinch when you get it wrong. That's okay too. But now you know. Now you see. And once you've seen, you can't unsee. Once you've tasted the truth, that you don't need to earn love, that your humanity isn't a flaw, you'll begin to move differently. You'll begin to speak more slowly, listen more kindly, breathe more fully. You'll begin to catch yourself before the spiral. You'll begin to ask, what would feel loving right now, instead of, what would look perfect? And when you forget, and you will forget, you'll remember how to return. Not with shame, but with grace. Because the real gift of letting go of perfection is not that life gets easier. It's that it gets honest. And in that honesty, you find connection. Not performance-based connection, but soul-deep belonging. The kind where you show up as you are, and someone looks you in the eye and says, I'm not leaving, even if that someone is just you. Especially if it's you. Because the hardest relationship to rebuild is the one we broke with ourselves, when we believed we had to be perfect to be loved. So if you're standing in front of the mirror, noticing the cracks, the scars, the weariness, please hear this. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not unworthy. You are unfolding. You are remembering. You are becoming, not someone new, but someone real. The you who no longer needs to be everything for everyone. The you who can simply be, and still be loved. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to ask for help. You're allowed to let people see you cry. And when they do, when they stay, you'll start to believe something revolutionary. That love isn't something you have to chase. It's something you get to receive. Even when you're imperfect. Especially then. And if no one has said it to you today, let me be the first. You don't have to be perfect anymore. You never did. If this resonated, you're not alone. Let me know what part felt real to you. And let it be the beginning of something softer. You've lived in the tension for so long. The tension between wanting to be free and being afraid of what freedom might cost. You want to breathe without bracing. You want to speak without rehearsing. You want to live without performing. But you worry, if you stop being everything to everyone, will there be anything left of you they'll want? That's the cruel promise of perfectionism. It seduces you with the illusion of acceptance, while quietly eroding the parts of you that were most worthy of being seen. Because the parts that make you lovable aren't your sharp edges or flawless execution. They're the parts that crack, that shake, that feel. The parts that know how to say, I don't know. The parts that can laugh at themselves without humiliation. The parts that can make mistakes and still show up again tomorrow. There's a phrase from Alfred Adler that echoes through this space. Trust only movement. Life happens at the level of events, not of words. So maybe it's time to move. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in the small, sacred rebellions. Like choosing to do something badly, just because it brings you joy. Like saying, I need a break, without explaining why. Like letting someone into your mess, even if your voice shakes when you ask. Each time you do, you loosen the grip. Each time you choose truth over perfection, you reclaim a little piece of your humanity. And slowly, the cage begins to open. Not with a bang, but with a breath. Because this is what healing sounds like. It doesn't scream, it exhales. It says, I'm not who I was. And I don't need to be who I thought I had to be. And that voice, the one inside you that's learning to whisper kindness where there once was only critique. That voice is your true self. It's the self who isn't obsessed with being right. It's the self who knows that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's life. It's the self who no longer waits for permission to be real. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. To hold both the light and the shadow. To make peace with your contradictions. To stop performing your life and start living it. You don't have to keep striving. You don't have to make your pain palatable. You don't have to smile through the ache. You are allowed to be fully known, as you are. And that is a kind of perfection the world can't manufacture. Not polished, not curated, but sacred. So let this moment be a soft threshold. The place where you stop trying to outrun your flaws and start learning how to love them. Let this be where the inner child, the one who tried so hard to be good, is finally told, you don't have to earn your place anymore. You already belong. No more proving. No more performing. Just presence. Just you. Imperfect. Tender. Real. Exactly as you are. And that is more than enough.